My aunt tried to trick me into selling my grandfather's house and giving her half the money, so I let her plan the entire sale, only to reveal at the last second that she would be getting nothing but the bill for her own greed. My world had shrunk to the size of a hospital room, smelling of antiseptic and quiet despair. My grandfather, the man who taught me how to fish with a patience I never thought possible and how to stand up for myself with a resolve I never knew I had, was gone. The silence he left behind was deafening. All I had left of him were the memories and the one place where those memories lived, breathed, and had weight, his house. It wasn't a mansion. It was a modest 2-story home on a quiet street, but it was built on a foundation of love and calloused hands. It had a porch swing he'd made himself, where we'd sat on summer evenings watching the fireflies. It had a garden out back he'd tended for 50 years, a riot of tomatoes and roses. To me, that house wasn't just wood and nails, it was the scrapbook of my life. It was my last tangible connection to him, my inheritance, and in that raw, aching moment, it was the only thing in the world I cared about. I was grieving, I was vulnerable, and I was about to learn that when a loved one dies, the vultures don't wait long to start circling. The head vulture was my Aunt Carol. She is my grandfather's daughter, a woman who measures love in dollar signs and whose primary emotion is a deep, simmering entitlement. All my life, she was the relative who would show up to family gatherings empty-handed, but leave with a trunk full of leftovers, all while complaining about how nobody ever helped her out. Her hugs felt like appraisals, her questions like interrogations into your financial stability. She saw my grandfather's deep, abiding love for me not as a bond to be cherished, but as a direct threat to her future payday. She viewed his house not as a home filled with memories, but as a giant piggy bank she was just waiting to crack open with a sledgehammer. The inciting incident happened 2 days later in the cold, sterile conference room of the estate lawyer, Mr. Davis. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, dust motes dancing in the slivers of light from the blinds. My Aunt Carol and my uncle were there, their faces carefully arranged into masks of somber grief. Carol's mask, however, kept slipping. Mr. Davis, a kind, tired man with eyes that had seen too many of these meetings, read the will in a calm, steady voice. It was simple and clear, just like my grandfather. All financial assets, the savings, the stocks, they were to be split evenly between his children, Carol and my uncle. And then came the final clause. And the house at 123 Oak Street, including all property and its contents, I leave solely and completely to my grandson, Brandon. The air went out of the room. I saw it, the flicker. Carol's mask of grief didn't just slip. It shattered for a fraction of a second. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowed into slits of pure, unadulterated fury. She recovered in an instant, composing her face back into a mask of sorrow, but it was too late. I had seen the vulture behind the veil. The moment we stepped out of the lawyer's office into the cold afternoon air, she made her move. She draped an arm around my shoulder, a gesture that felt more like a trap than a comfort. "Sweetheart," she began, her voice a weaponized syrup of concern. "I know what the will says, but you and I both know your grandfather, bless his heart, wasn't always thinking clearly at the end. He would have wanted us to share. It's just not fair for you to get the biggest asset all to yourself. The only right thing to do is sell the house and split it, 50/50ths. It's what he would have wanted. My grandfather had just died, and she was already talking about liquidating his legacy? The words 50/50 echoed in my head. He didn't leave her the house. He left it to me. I knew my grandfather better than anyone. He was a meticulous man who planned everything. If he had wanted her to have half the house, the will would have said so. This wasn't about fairness, this was a shakedown. A cold, hard anger began to smolder beneath my grief. And in that fire, an idea began to form. A terrible, beautiful, and exquisitely vengeful idea. My grandfather taught me to stand up to bullies. He never said they couldn't be family. I let my shoulders slump. I looked at her, my expression a careful mixture of sadness, confusion, and exhaustion. "You're right, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice soft and broken. "It's all so overwhelming. I wouldn't even know where to start." I let out a heavy sigh, a masterpiece of dramatic grief. "If you're so sure this is what Grandpa would have wanted, maybe you could handle it? Find the realtor, get the house ready for sale, you're so much better at this stuff than I am." I looked her in the eyes, sealing the deal. "We can just settle everything out of the final sale price." A triumphant glint, almost imperceptible, appeared in her eyes. She thought she was dealing with a grieving, gullible kid. She thought she had won. She took the bait. The trap was set. Aunt Carol didn't just walk into the trap, she sprinted. She went from concerned aunt to wannabe real estate mogul overnight. The next day she called me, her voice brisk and businesslike. "I've hired a realtor, sweetheart. A top agent. She says we can get top dollar, but we need to invest a little to make it perfect." Her idea of a little was my idea of a king's ransom. She didn't just suggest we clean the place up. She demanded a full-scale renovation. My grandfather's cozy, slightly dated kitchen? "Gutted," she declared. "We need a new kitchen to maximize the value." She sent me a quote for $25,000. His humble, clean bathrooms? So dated. "We need new vanities, new tile, everything." Another $10,000. The sound of sledgehammers echoing through my grandfather's home, breaking the very tiles he had laid with his own hands, felt like a desecration. She paraded contractors through the house, making decisions, signing work orders, and acting for all the world like she was the sole owner. She even started telling the rest of the family about her big real estate project and how generous she was being by helping me through this difficult time. My email and voicemail were flooded. It was a masterclass in plausible deniability, and I was the star student. The contractor needed a decision on granite countertops. The painter needed me to choose between eggshell and satin. The realtor needed me to sign off on the marketing budget. My response was always the same. I played the part of the grieving, overwhelmed heir perfectly. I would forward every email, every invoice, and every decision to Aunt Carol. My text messages were a constant stream. Aunt Carol, the contractor is asking about the backsplash tile. I just can't make a decision right now. Can you handle it? You have such great taste. Aunt Carol, the realtor sent over the staging contract. It's so much legalese. Could you look it over and sign it? I don't understand any of this. Aunt Carol, the landscaper wants to know if we should do mulch or pine straw. What do you think is best for curb appeal? With every forwarded email, with every text message she confidently replied to, she was tightening the noose around her own neck. She was creating a mountain of evidence, a digital paper trail of her own greed and absolute control. I needed a professional who could appreciate the beautiful legal devastation I was planning. I scheduled a private meeting with Mr. Davis, the estate lawyer. I laid out the whole plan, my heart pounding in my chest. I showed him the binder I'd started, printed copies of the emails, the texts, the signed work orders from Carol. He listened intently, his expression shifting from cautious concern to curiosity and finally to a slow, spreading grin that transformed his tired face. He leaned back in his big leather chair, which groaned in protest. "My boy," he said, a chuckle rumbling in his chest. "Your grandfather would be so proud. This is exactly the kind of standing up for yourself he believed in. He always said, 'Never start a fight, but God help the person who starts one with you.'" He leaned forward, his eyes glinting. "Let's make sure we do this by the book. Document everything. Every phone call, every text. Let her sign everything. And whatever you do not give her power of attorney. Let her act as your assumed agent. It's perfect." His validation was the armor I needed. We spent the next hour mapping out the endgame, and Mr. Davis seemed to be having the most fun he'd had in years. 2 months into the renovations, a certified letter arrived. It was a consolidated invoice from the general contractor for all the work Carol had authorized, on behalf of the estate. The total was over $75,000. My stomach dropped to the floor. I looked at the numbers at the line items for Tuscan gold granite and brushed nickel fixtures. Things my grandfather would have scoffed at. I had been pre-approved for a home loan to buy the house from the estate, but this was more than I expected. For a terrifying moment, doubt crept in, cold and oily. What if the plan failed? What if some legal loophole made me responsible for her spending spree? What if I was stuck with a half-renovated house and a mountain of debt? I felt a sharp pang of guilt. I was turning my grandfather's peaceful home into a battleground, letting strangers tear apart the walls that held my childhood memories. Was this really what he would have wanted? I had to walk myself back from the ledge, clutching the letter in my hand. I had to remember the look on her face in the lawyer's office. This wasn't just about a house. This was about justice. My grandfather wouldn't have wanted me to be a doormat. He would have wanted me to finish the fight. The day of the closing was a spectacle. We all gathered back in Mr. Davis's conference room. The air was electric with tension, at least for me. I was quiet and somber, dressed in a simple dark suit. Aunt Carol, however, was dressed to the nines in a bright, gaudy pantsuit, practically vibrating with excitement. She was talking loudly on her phone to a friend about a first-class cruise to the Bahamas she was about to book. "Yes, the check clears today," she crowed. "I'm heading straight to the travel agent from here." The realtor, her slick friend, sat beside her, both of them looking like cats that had just cornered a very plump, very stupid canary. Mr. Davis cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming. We have the final sale documents here." He slid a settlement statement across the polished mahogany table. At the top was the agreed-upon sale price for the house, $450,000. Aunt Carol's eyes lit up. She was already mentally spending her $225,000 share. Mr. Davis continued, his voice calm and methodical. "From this, we deduct the realtor's commission of $27,000. Carol nodded impatiently, as if to say, "Get on with it." "And we deduct the renovation and staging costs, totaling $78,450. Her smile tightened just a little. She shot me a look that said, "See how much I increased the value? This leaves a net proceed of $344,550. "Great," she chirped, pulling her purse onto her lap. "So just cut the checks for $172,275 each, and we can be on our way." "Almost," Mr. Davis said, a glint in his eye that only I understood. "There is one final step. The estate needs to receive payment from the buyer." He looked at me. With a steady hand, I slid a cashier's check across the table to him. He examined it, nodded, and then, with a subtle flourish, pushed it toward Aunt Carol so she could see. The check was for $450,000. The name in the pay to the order of line was the estate of my grandfather. The name in the from line was mine. Carol stared at the check, her brow furrowed in a mask of utter confusion. Her brain, so quick to calculate her share, couldn't process this new information. "What is this?" she asked, her voice a confused whisper. "What are you doing? That's your name." I finally spoke, my voice clear and steady. cutting through the silence in the room. I'm buying the house, Aunt Carol. I decided I didn't want to sell it after all. Her head whipped back and forth between me and Mr. Davis, like a spectator at a tennis match she was suddenly losing. But the money. Our split. We had an agreement. Mr. Davis folded his hands on the table. Carol, there is no split, he said gently, his voice carrying the weight of inescapable legal fact. There was no written agreement. The will was clear. The house belongs to my client. He is the sole owner. You graciously, and on your own initiative, offered to act as his agent to manage renovations. He is now purchasing the asset from the estate, which he is legally entitled to do. The estate now has the funds to pay the bills for the services you contracted. The color drained from her face, then came roaring back as a tide of crimson rage. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled into dust. This is trickery, she shrieked, standing up so fast her chair screeched backward on the floor. This is illegal. You can't do this. I spent months on this. I'm owed half of that money. I'll sue you. I'll sue you both for everything you have. Mr. Davis calmly gestured to the thick binder I had given him, which was sitting on the corner of the table. On what grounds, Carol? This folder contains every email, every text message, and every work order you authorized, acting as an agent for the estate. You have no legal claim to this property. You never did. You acted, and now the bills you incurred are due. She turned her venomous gaze on me, her eyes bulging. How could you do this to me? To your own family? Your grandfather would be spinning in his grave. He would be so ashamed of you. I met her gaze without flinching. The grief and confusion I had been faking for months had been replaced by a quiet, solid strength. No, Aunt Carol, I said, my voice quiet but firm. He taught me to stand up for myself, especially to people who try to take what isn't theirs. I think he'd be proud. I picked up a pen from the table, the ceremonial pen for the signing. Thank you for fixing up my house. It looks great. The true justice was the silence that followed her sputtering rage. It was the moment the math finally clicked in her avaricious brain. The moment she realized that not only was there no six-figure payday, no first-class cruise, but that she had single-handedly racked up nearly $80,000 in costs. Costs that were now being paid from the estate's cash. The same cash that she was legally entitled to half of. Her greed had literally eaten her inheritance. Every dollar she had spent to maximize the value, for her own benefit, had come directly out of her own pocket. She had played herself perfectly and completely. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, making a sound like a deflating balloon. Carol grabbed her purse and stormed out of the office, screaming about how she was going to get the best lawyer in the state. She never did. I calmly sat with Mr. Davis and signed the final papers. The house was officially, unequivocally mine, complete with a brand new kitchen and bathrooms, paid for by my aunt's own hubris. As expected, Carol launched a scorched earth smear campaign among the family, painting me as a manipulative, backstabbing monster. I got ahead of it with a single, simple group email to the entire family. Subject: Good news about Grandpa's house. Hi everyone. I have some wonderful news I wanted to share. After looking at all the options, I've been able to secure financing and will be keeping Grandpa's house. I know how much it meant to all of us, and I couldn't bear to let it go. I especially want to thank Aunt Carol, who was a huge help in managing some much-needed renovations. She has incredible taste and worked so hard to get it updated for me to live in. I'm so grateful for all her effort. I can't wait to have you all over for a housewarming barbecue very soon to see the beautiful work she supervised. All the best, Brandon. Her narrative was dead on arrival. The email, dripping with sincerity she couldn't possibly refute, painted her into a corner. She was left looking like a fool to anyone who knew the real story, and a wonderfully generous aunt to anyone who didn't. Checkmate. 6 months later, I was sitting on the porch swing my grandfather had built, a cold drink in my hand. The house was filled with my things, but his spirit was everywhere. The garden was thriving. The new kitchen was gleaming. My uncle, Carol's brother, had called me the week after the closing. Don't you worry about her, he'd said. She got what she deserved. Dad always said she could never see past the dollar signs. He would have gotten a real kick out of this. He would have been proud of you. I looked out at the street where my grandfather had taught me to ride a bike. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt since before he got sick. Carol had tried to steal a house, but in doing so, she had given me a gift far more valuable. She had forced me to become the man my grandfather always knew I could be. I hadn't just inherited his house. I had finally, truly, inherited his backbone. And that was a legacy no one could ever put a price on.